All right, hello again, everybody. This is the Fantasy Sports Boss with another 2024 Fantasy Football Player Analyzer. And today we're going to talk about David Montgomery, running back of the Detroit Lions. And, of course, the Lions fresh off a really heartbreaking loss to the San Francisco 49ers in the NFC Championship game late Sunday evening. I'm going to have a separate video on both the AFC and the NFC Championship games, so make sure you look for that. I'm going to post that, as soon as possible later on today. So make sure you keep an eye out for that. Now, as far as David Montgomery is concerned, wanted to touch on him, rehash his 2023, and then take a look at what we could possibly see out of him from 2024. But as far as Montgomery is concerned for this season, so there was a lot of initial excitement during early free agency, when the Lions opened up the vault and they signed David Montgomery to a sizable free agent contract. All right, this is a team that needed a running back. Like, that was one of the crying needs of this team in 2022, and they signed Montgomery late of the Chicago Bears. And, during his tenure with the Bears, Montgomery was a solid, fairly dependable running back too. Lacked flash, lacked, glitzy numbers. He played on some really bad Chicago teams. Never has been an explosive player by any means. And some really bad offensive lines in Chicago kind of conspired to hurt his numbers. He had under 4 yards per carry, but he ran hard. Generally made good around the goal line. And this is a guy who caught a lot of passes back in college, right? When he was in college at Iowa State. And the Bears used him fairly often in that. I felt like they could have used him more, but he was a solid receiving back for the Bears. So, listen, going to Detroit with one of the best offensive lines in football, there was initial excitement in fantasy football. But that didn't last long, because the Lions then subsequently used the 12th overall pick on the very explosive Jahmyr Gibbs of Alabama. And so right off the bat there, Gibbs became very intriguing in fantasy because of his receiving potential and his explosive running. And then David Montgomery fell into that running back dead zone. Now, the running back dead zone was incredibly profitable this year, right? Rachaad White, David Montgomery himself, James Conner. There was a lot of values in that running back dead zone. I think it's going to cause people to look at the running back position. I've been saying this. I've been ahead of the curve for the last couple of years. And anybody who's been a member of this channel or a habitual watcher of this channel know that I have been ahead of the curve on this the last couple of years, saying go wide receiver, go wide receiver, go wide receiver, and then come back later on and get some running backs, including the running back dead zone. So, but Montgomery fell into that dead zone, and, there was some trepidation with him not knowing how much work he was going to get. Well, once the season started, and, if you were a Gibbs owner, initially the first few weeks, it was like all David Montgomery. Now, he got hurt. He missed a couple of games, 3 games with injury. But he was the bell cow back for the first, his first 6 games or so, until Gibbs then started to eat into Montgomery's workload. They brought Gibbs along slowly because he was a smaller back. They wanted to preserve him for the stretch run and into the playoffs. And certainly it paid off since they made the NFC Championship, and Gibbs was as explosive as ever that late in the season. Now, as far as Montgomery was concerned, his 2023 numbers, he averaged a career best by far 4.6 yards per carry. He looked faster. And again, you could chalk a lot of that up to the Detroit offensive line. Really, really, really good unit. I mean, let's face it. Montgomery had to be loving life running behind this line. 4.6 per carry. Very impressive number. 1,015 yards on the ground in only 14 games. He was one of 12 backs to rush for 1,000 yards, right? Only 12. Like, back in the day, you would see, 15 backs go for 1,000 yards. Now, only 12, and Montgomery was one of them in only 14 games. The big thing here for him, though, 13 touchdowns on the ground. Jamal Williams the year before had 17. We thought this would be the role for Montgomery, and he was headed for that 17 until the second half of the year. Jahmyr Gibbs started to get about 50% of the goal line work, plus 50% or more of the overall work. But Montgomery was generally out there on the first. He was out there for the first drive, first, second down. A lot of the times Gibbs came in on third down. But still, Montgomery was a firm running back too in all formats. Now, the negatives. Hardly was involved in the pass game. Only 16 catches for 117 yards, no scores. And remember, in Chicago, he caught 30-plus passes a number of years. Like, he was a good receiver. And in college, he was an excellent receiver. But the Bears did not scheme Montgomery for the receiving game. They schemed Gibbs in the passing game. Montgomery, the receptions he got were really just because of dump-offs. The play broke down. They had to, Jared Goff had to dump it off. That's where Montgomery got his catches. So in a PPR league, he was not as valuable, all right? And also, as the season went on, Gibbs got more and more work at the expense of Montgomery, and he was getting goal line work as well. So for 2024, when you project ahead, it might be difficult for Montgomery to replicate those 13 scores on the ground. Can he get 10 to 11? Yeah, absolutely. And I think he will be there. But Gibbs is not going away. He's probably going to get more and more work as we go along. Montgomery will be a first and second down staple. Gibbs will be second and third down. That's how they'll probably divide it up. And Montgomery, again, is not going to be much involved in the passing game. So in PPR leagues, that drops him to firm running back 2 status. In standard leagues, he's a high-end running back 2 because, again, he's going to get touchdowns. He's going to get goal line work. Not sure why anybody's still playing in a standard league. Like, that's kind of a Neanderthal league now, in my opinion. But for next season, I could see Montgomery. I think the rushing yards will dip below 1,000 because Gibbs will get more work. But I could see, 10 to 11, maybe even 12 touchdowns on the ground, 15 to 20 receptions. That's about all we're going to expect there. But again, solid running back 2. He has missed some time with injury the last couple of years. But David Montgomery had a good season, underrated season. I think he's going to be very useful again next season. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. Hit that subscribe button. More on the way soon.